Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm the LGBTQIA plus representative for the South East for the Pagan Federation. As you can probably tell, I haven't always been Caitlin. In fact, it's relatively new. Today, or at least the day this is being put out, is my 68th birthday. And I found out I was trans on the 10th of January 2019 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's that precise. People often ask me, how come you didn't know before? And I think it's to do with how old I am, when I grew up, and where I grew up. Being born in the 50s and growing up in the sort of late 50s, early 60s in a small Welsh village, being trans wasn't something that was ever talked about. All I knew was that from a very early age, I felt wrong, physically and mentally. Problem was, I had no idea what right was. I had 3 sisters, all younger than me. My father worked away a lot, so it was always on me to look after them. Mum would always say, make sure you look after your sisters. And that was probably the first expectation that was put on me. And for the next 45, 55 years, I just went from one expectation to another. Always trying to do what people wanted. Always trying to be what people expected. And as far as I was concerned, failing. I had a number of jobs in that time. I was civil servant, school teacher, photographer, data analyst, data manager. And none of those really lasted, even though several of them I was supposedly quite good at. It was just, I felt I was failing. All of them ended with long bouts of depression, which I'd suffered with since my late teens, early 20s. So always there, sometimes severe, and if I hadn't met my wife when I was about 32, 33, I don't think I'd be here now. Somehow she was the one person who never expected anything of me. She just took me for who I was, which is probably something even I didn't do. She was the only person I could talk to. Didn't have any friends. I spoke to people at work, but it was always a mask. And as soon as I had the chance, I got out. Eventually, my stress and depression sort of caused other problems, and I developed Crohn's disease, which in some ways I found really useful because I used that as an excuse. If I was asked to do something and it was something I knew I wouldn't be able to do because I just couldn't cope, I'd say, oh, my Crohn's is playing up, we can't go, sorry, we won't be able to make it. Even though at that time it's not as bad as a lot of people, and it was always held with medication. But then I retired at 64 after another long bout of depression, and did nothing for a few years until 2019. And it was like that's when my life started, that moment. I was lucky. I can afford to go private. I've been on hormones since probably 10 weeks after discovering I was trans. And it's made a huge difference to my life. I'm finally me. Everything seems right. I was helped in a big way. I don't know what made me do it, but I volunteered to work at a women's centre. Even though there was a lot of talk around at the time saying that women's centres were very anti-trans, I volunteered at my local one and was volunteer for a while, and then actually taken on as paid staff. And I worked on the domestic abuse team. And the fact that all the women who worked there and all the women who we supported just accepted me for who I was, even though then I still looked a lot like the old me, has allowed me to grow. So you're probably wondering what this has to do with being pagan. Well, I've probably been pagan with a small p for 35, 40 years. Did lots of reading. It was one of the things I used to do because I never went anywhere. Used to read, find out all sorts of interesting faiths and practices. Tried lots of them. Dabbled in Wicca, shamanism, druidry, but never felt right. And now I think it's because I didn't accept me. I didn't think anyone else would like me. So I thought, well, if no one else is going to like me, why do I bother trying to do anything? Because the gods won't like me. And then I started a few years ago, after finding myself, to change my thoughts. Now I was finally happy, and I have friends. I was able to talk with other people, and I listened to podcasts, and two in particular that have sort of done quite a lot for me are The Weird Thing and Heathen Weirdos. I realised that Norse paganism wasn't what I'd always imagined it to be. I'd always thought of it as the typical American white supremacist religion and never really looked any deeper. But when I did start looking into it and seeing all those gender fluid and other sort of gender aspects of the gods and their stories, it really sort of struck home that this was a faith that really did mean something to me. I think without finding myself, I would never have found that. So I think that's the main reason I wanted to do this, was to say, be true to yourself. You can find yourself. And once you find yourself, that's when you should be able to find your faith. If you don't know yourself, it's going to be very difficult. So I hope that's been of benefit to some of you. And if anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to talk to me about, I'm perfectly happy to talk. In fact, that's probably one of the few things that I was always very reluctant to do, and now it's quite difficult to stop me talking, so feel free to do so.